Greetings, Hamptonians and guests. Thank you guys all for joining us tonight for our Get Out the Vote Voter Mobilization Seminar. I'm super excited to be a part of this as the NHAA president. My name is Gena Pemberton. I'd like to thank our amazing panelists who are fellow alum. We have Lani Shaw from the class of 2002, Stacy Lynch, the class of 1998, Yvonne Saxon, the class of 1985, and Kendra Brown, class of '02. Thank you, all of you all, for being a part of this event. The power of Hamptonians as a collective is fierce, and that's why we felt like this was really important to take this opportunity to bring people together to understand that, voting and mobilizing your family is most important right now, as this is probably the most important election of our lifetime. And regardless of your political affiliation, let's celebrate the fact that we have a fellow HBCU grad on the ballot. And there's nothing more exciting than that. So please make sure your voice is heard, and that you vote, and then you have all of your family and friends to vote. I'm going to thank you all for being here right now today to hear from these phenomenal Hamptonians that are giving their time this evening to talk to us. So I'm going to pass it over to Lani Shaw, who is also the vice president of the NHAA, so she can get this party started. Thanks, Lani. Thanks, Lani.
Thank you, President Pemberton. Good evening. My name is Lani Shaw, and as an attorney and as the first vice president for the National Hampton Alumni Association, I'm very excited to host tonight's panel. We are excited to have an opportunity to talk about getting out the vote and voter mobilization tactics. Voting is such an important topic, and I feel that we have a duty and a responsibility to share information and strategies for increasing voter turnout. We have three dynamic Hamptonians that will serve as our panelists tonight, and we are in for a treat. I know that they have come prepared to share tips and strategies. So without further ado, I want to just go ahead and briefly introduce them to you. Our first panelist is Kendra Brown, also my classmate. Kendra is the Director of Public Policy for Mastercard. She previously served as the Chief of Staff for Representative G.K. Butterfield in the United States Congress. Most recently, she was the Senior Director for Diversity, Inclusion, and Affinity for the Washington College of Law at American University, where she led the law school's diversity and inclusion initiatives. Kendra is a 2002 graduate of Hampton University, and among other degrees, she received her law degree from Vermont Law School. Please join me in welcoming Kendra. Our second panelist is Stacy Renee Lynch. As the Deputy Director at the Mayor's Office of Intergovernmental Affairs, Stacy manages First Lady Shirlane McCray's public affairs and the Mayor's interaction with government agencies and key community stakeholders like the NAACP, the New York Urban League, the Asian American Federation, the Black Institute, the National Action Network, and the Rainbow Push Coalition. Stacy is a graduate of Hampton University and Quinnipiac Law School. Thank you for joining us, Stacy.
Happy to be here.
Our third panelist is Yvonne Saxon. Yvonne is a native of Mobile, Alabama, and a 1985 graduate of Hampton University and a 1988 graduate of the University of Alabama School of Law. Attorney Saxon is employed by the Alabama Attorney General's Office as an Assistant Attorney General in the Criminal Appeals Division and serves as the General Counsel for the Alabama Board of Examiners for Speech Language Pathology and Audiology. We are excited to have Yvonne, who serves as a Vice President for the Eastern Region for NHAA Inc., to join us tonight. Welcome, Yvonne.
Glad to be here.
As you can see, we have a dynamic group of panelists for tonight's seminar. They represent various areas of the country, with Stacy in New York, Kendra in Maryland, and Yvonne in Alabama. I know that they are prepared to provide tips and strategies for getting out the vote and increasing voter turnout. Our first question tonight will be one for each of the panelists to answer. We will start with Kendra, and the question is, why is voting critical?
Voting is critical, and thank you for having me as a part of the panel discussion this evening. Voting is critical because it is the means by which our voices are heard. There's so much that is at stake, and we want to ensure everyone has a plan to vote. I know that we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but voting is so critical because it will determine who your representatives are at the federal, state, local level. It's not only about a presidential election. There are so many other electeds that are on the ballot, city councilmen, right? We have school board officials, we have judges. So there's so many different races that are on the ballot. And these are the individuals who you elect to represent you. So it is critically important. There are many who fought hard to ensure that we had the right to vote. So we cannot forsake that.
Thank you, Kendra. We will next move to Stacy.
So I'm going to add to what Kendra just said, and excuse me, I feel like I'm at home. This is my home by the sea, and so I'm going to be brutally honest with folks, and I'm going to take a little privilege in my responses tonight because the president of the association is my dear friend Gena Pemberton. So I want to make sure I represent her well. Let me start by saying that historically, Black Americans have just fought for their right to vote. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 was signed, roughly 55 years ago. We continue to fight for voting rights. This current administration, to a certain degree, has eliminated a lot of the policy and the structure that empowered Black Americans. So, to answer your original question, Lani, the reason why it's critical to vote is that most of our parents and grandparents literally just had the ability to vote, right? And it's critical as the next generation to fight for that right to vote. And the way you do that is by going out to vote for people that are like-minded like you, support the policies that are important to you, particularly Hamptonians. Most of us are, Black Americans from the South or the Caribbean. And if you don't vote, you lose some of the rights that empower you as a citizen of the United States. So I just want to reiterate, historically, it's important to vote just because of what our parents and our grandparents fought for.
And Yvonne?
Good evening, Lani, and again, thank you for inviting me to be part of the panelists tonight. And I would like to echo the sentiments that both Kendra and Stacy expressed, and add to that voting has consequences. When we don't vote, we see what happens, and that your vote, one vote, impacts the way all levels of government, as Kendra, pointed out earlier. But it's so important that we vote because we have two parts going on. You have action and then you have voting. So the voting actually solidifies all those actions and the protests and everything else that we are trying to do. You need both to actually make our government work properly and to properly represent our interests. So when we don't vote, we lose our voice. Voting is our voice to make change. So if you're unhappy with something, you don't have to sit by and just let it happen that way. This is a democracy that we live in. We have a right to vote, and you have a right to make changes and affect the changes that you want to see. When you sit out and you don't vote, then you get certain results. Right now, we're in the fight for the Supreme Court. We got so many things are on the ballot. So when you go in there, it's not just the people you're voting for. You're voting for your family. You're voting for one vote on November the 3rd. Is not just for 4 years. You're talking about a generation of lifetime that we are trying to affect with just one vote on that day. We are, as Kendra just pointed out, we see all of the changes that happen with what happened with the vote or no vote in 2016. You know, so many things are rolling back. And if you indeed want to have a say so, whether you like things one day one way or the other, your chance to have a voice in it is simply to vote. Thank you.
So each of our panelists has taken an opportunity to tell us why voting is important. One of the things that we hear often is about GoTV or Get Out the Vote and voter mobilization. So I want them to briefly sort of describe what those terms mean and sort of how we put them into practice. So we will start with Yvonne this time.
Okay. When we think about GOTV, it means just that, get out the vote. And, there's so many ways in which you get out the vote. We think about there's a theme this year about the season of voting. So people can embrace the whole concept that we don't vote on one day. We have one day that's designated nationally, but we have a season of voting. And that a part of this season is about learning how to plan your vote. And so when we start talking about get out the vote, it all matters where you live. Depends on where you live, has a lot to do with how the push is going. I live in Alabama where we do have early voting through what's called absentee voting. And so now this year, it's been a big push to get people to go to the election office and place your vote early and in person because of COVID and other matters. So getting out that vote is just a process of us helping people get to the polls, providing different mechanisms if people need assistance. You do that through different organizations, as we'll discuss a little bit later. But in terms of that, it's all about how do you actually get those people who registered.
Yeah.
Okay, it's one thing to register. Okay, it's a whole nother thing to vote. You can be registered, but that's just one part of it. It's kind of like getting your learner's permit and never getting your driver's license. You don't really get control of the wheel until you get your driver's license. So you don't really get to control or say what's happening until you actually go to the polls and vote.
Thank you, Yvonne. We will now move to Kendra for that same question.
Yes, and I agree with Yvonne. It is about ensuring that everyone is out there, makes their plan, ensures that they understand their own jurisdiction. So what the logistics are, what the timeline is, wherever you are. And please don't think that another state's timeline is yours. Make sure that you're going to your state board of elections and knowing exactly where the ballot boxes are, knowing where your voting precinct is. I saw something out of Texas today. I think that they're having a ballot box per county. So hopefully that's not right. Hopefully that's inaccurate. Hopefully I'm seeing an update incorrectly, because I hope that that's not the case, especially for a state that's that large with that many people. And so just know what's happening in your state, in your jurisdiction, but also, so I've seen a lot of timelines, they've been changing also. And so make sure that you have the most up-to-date information.
Yeah.
And Stacy, you want to chime in on that as well?
Sure. So I'm going to speak to GOTV from a technical point of view. I've worked on a couple of campaigns, and GOTV, Get Out the Vote, is just that. GOTV is normally driven by political campaigns or PACs, also known as political action committees. And what they generally do is mobilize like-minded people, right, who are registered, to Yvonne's point, and get them out to the polls. And how they do that is through a number of ways. One, a text message, right, informing the voter of when your polls are open, some of the candidate issues, some of the issues that are important to a particular PAC. Others do like direct mail, where you'll receive a flyer from a PAC or a candidate. Other ways, calls. Sometimes you'll receive a call from a campaign or a political PAC. encouraging people to go out to vote. I think overall the point is to educate the voter and get them motivated to go out to the polls. If we have a little time, I'd like to share a quick story. Maybe 2.5, 3 years ago, there was a candidate running for a particular position, and she was a sister, right? And the campaign started to get really dirty. And the Black women in New York City, Lainey, let me tell you, we started mobilizing, right? It was text 10 or 15 of your friends to get them out to vote for this candidate. And it became a groundswell where this candidate was behind in the numbers. She ultimately became Attorney General of the state of New York. And so that type of mobilization is what GOTV is about.
Yeah. And that story really drives home how people can work together and move a campaign forward.
Absolutely.
So I really don't want to stop there. I want to turn to Kendra for a moment, though, to talk a little bit about some of these Black organizations, because we talk about like-minded individuals that come together. And so I want to talk about some of the strategies and tips that we've seen, or campaigns that we've seen from coming out of Black organizations. It could be sororities or fraternities, civic organizations, organizations such as the National Hampton Alumni Association, when we talk about alumni associations for the number of HBCUs or for majority schools and their Black focused organizations. So Kendra, I'm going to start with you on that question.
Sure, and thank you for that. Within Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, which I can share from that perspective, they have AKA's LEAD, and that is the overarching platform that is being utilized to ensure that individuals are educated about the voting process. I'm the president of my chapter, and we just finished a series of 3 panels where we are ensuring that we are educating our community. Our first conversation dealt with starting young, starting local, being civically engaged. Next, we spoke about ensuring that our voices were heard. And lastly, just this week, we had a conversation about combating voter suppression. We partnered with Baltimore Black Girls Vote, just ensuring that we were having folks who were a part of the community and had a lot of community leaders who were a part of that conversation. And so those are the types of efforts that are happening in locales across the nation, where there are roundtable discussions. I know that the DMV Links had a conversation, just last night. Attorney General Eric Holder, he was a part of that. The former mayor of Baltimore, Stephanie Rawlings-Blake, she was a part of that. It's just things like this where there are collaborations with lots of different people from a lot of places that have similar, ideologies and share the same values and want to ensure that the historical context of why we are voting, why we value our vote is brought forward. But I think that part of what we have to see is that there are so many commonalities and things that we have to fight for. So we have to understand why our vote is valuable. So those are some of the ways that I know.
And Stacy, did you want to chime in on that?
Sure. So I know Kamala is an AKA sister. She's also a Link sister, so I have to shout that out as well.
Yeah.
To Kendra's point, recently there was a conference call with the Divine Nine and the Links and other women's organizations, moderated by Oprah Winfrey. And the conversation was GOTV. How do we get folks out to vote, right? And I think particularly in this election, Black organizations are critically important. Mobilization of HBCUs are also critically important. Just by nature, Black folks, right, work as coalitions, right? We're coalition builders. And so I think the more we work together on mobilization, getting the vote out, the better result we will see. And, you know, to be very honest, like, let's recognize the power that we have as organizations, as individuals, and individually. So, you know, I'm a strong believer of coalition building, and I think, you know, our organizations, CBOs, fraternities, sororities, they're a critical component of all that.